dreaded of them all, the most diced to the socks mofo that ever walked on this bitch right here. The level of conditioning that this Austrian dude was bringing to the game was absolutely unheard of.
They say play stupid games, win stupid prizes. And in the world of professional bodybuilding, where extreme measures often bring the biggest rewards, few stories are as extreme or tragic as that of Andreas Munzer. For nearly a decade, Andreas pushed his body to the brink in his quest to achieve that mind-blowing zero body fat look that judges drooled over. But his intense workouts, starvation diets, and a cocktail of drugs turned that dream into a death sentence. This is the story of the bodybuilder who drained every last ounce of fat from his body, until he eventually drained the life right out of it too. But before we get into the gruesome detail, let's rewind a bit, because Andreas Munzer's story did not start under the stage lights or in the chaos of competition. You see, Andreas was born on October 25, 1964 in Pack, Austria, a sleepy little village tucked near Thal, the very same hometown as Arnold Schwarzenegger. But while Schwarzenegger would one day become a Hollywood powerhouse, young Andreas was a shy, soft-spoken farm boy helping his family run their small dairy operation. Quiet and reserved, he spent his days milking cows, doing chores, and dreaming small. Yet even as a kid, there were glimpses of the fierce determination that would later define him. As a teenager, he took up a tool-making apprenticeship in Kuflach, a town about 5 miles from home. It was not exactly glamorous, but it was steady work. The only problem was his shift ended 2 hours before the next bus home. Most people might have used that time to sit around and sulk, but Andreas had other ideas. He wasn't the type to waste time twiddling his thumbs, so he did what seemed like a small, harmless decision at the time. He joined a nearby gym close to work. It wasn't about fame or fortune back then. It wasn't even about bodybuilding. At the time, he only wanted to be productive and improve his health. But that one innocent choice set off a chain reaction that would change the course of his life forever. What Andreas did not know that day as he walked into that fitness studio was that he had taken the first step toward both his greatest triumph and his eventual downfall. As the years rolled by, Andreas threw himself into training with the kind of intensity that could melt steel. And in the early 80s, the results were impossible to miss. He was growing bigger, leaner, and more defined by the day. Determined to turn his passion into a career, Munzer packed his bags and moved to Germany, where he found a gym with serious equipment, serious trainers, and a shot at something more than lifting weights for fun. That's when his journey into the world of competitive bodybuilding truly began. By 1984, a 20-year-old Andreas was already making waves. For starters, he appeared in international contests like the IFBB European Amateur Championships and a year later, the IFBB World Amateur Championships. He finished 6th in his debut, which was a respectable feat for someone so new to the scene. But more importantly, it was a foot in the door, and Andreas was not about to stop there. He doubled down on his training and chased perfection with the same relentless drive that had already carried him this far. 2 years later, that work paid off when he finished 3rd at the 1988 Amateur World Championships. In 1989, Munzer took a step further and stepped onto bodybuilding's biggest and most prestigious stage, Mr. Olympia. Standing at 5'7" on competition day, Andreas was a walking anatomy chart. At 227 pounds of pure muscle, he looked like someone had peeled his skin back to reveal every vein, striation, and sinew beneath. The judges and fans could not help but stare when Andreas hit the stage, and he earned it. Although he placed 13th, it was still an impressive debut considering his limited experience as a pro. His shredded physique turned heads, and his unique conditioning made him unforgettable. But beneath that flawless exterior, no one could have guessed the extreme measures he was taking to maintain it, or how dangerous these methods really were. After turning pro, Andreas knew that staying in peak condition was a never-ending battle. A war he fought daily with training and willpower. And in order to win that battle, the gym became his second home, and his life revolved around a punishing routine. For at least 6 days a week, Andreas pushed his body to its breaking point with grueling strength training and relentless cardio, leaving behind puddles of sweat and muscles screaming for mercy. He wasn't just chasing the dream of being sculpted like a Greek god, though every chiseled line in his physique hinted at that. He also wanted to carve out a legacy, to follow in the footsteps of his hometown hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and maybe even surpass him. Similar to his workouts, Munzer's diet was as brutal as it gets, with fat practically banished from his plate. The only fat he allowed came from carefully measured portions of red meat and chicken breast, and even those were tightly controlled. Every day he guzzled between 2 and 2.5 gallons of water, as if it were the fuel keeping his machine-like body running, and added magnesium to keep his electrolyte balance in check. On top of that, he popped amino acids, vitamins, zinc, and vitamin A supplements in order to make up for the insane demands he put on his body. But those were just the illegal supplements. Beneath that clean-eating, disciplined image that Andreas portrayed, he was heavily relying on anabolic steroids, diuretics, and performance-enhancing drugs. The real secret behind that paper-thin skin and anatomical precision that made him look like a Greek god come to life. However, like you would find with many other bodybuilders that relied on drugs throughout their career, the more results he saw, the more drugs he decided to use. After years of brutal cycles, his body was practically a chemistry experiment on overdrive. Every day he injected half a gram of testosterone, swallowed oral steroids like halotestin and anadrol, and pumped himself with up to 24 units of human growth hormone. Now, just in case you are not an expert in steroid use, which let's be honest, you probably are not, human growth hormone does not just give you bigger biceps. It cranks everything up to 11. Muscles, bones, organs, everything inside your body starts growing like it's on some kind of turbocharged upgrade plan. And Andreas, with his shredded to the bone, borderline alien physique, was living proof of just how far that stuff could take you if you were willing to treat your health like a ticking time bomb. To fuel that massive frame, Andreas consumed anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day. But thanks to his accelerated metabolism, he torched through those calories faster than most people could finish a snack. His mornings started with at least 5 aspirin tablets to thin his blood and numb the pain from the relentless pounding his body took during the workouts. After that, he popped stimulants like ephedrine and captagon, drugs that revved up his system and gave him the energy to push even harder in the gym. But the real madness began in the weeks leading up to competitions. About 15 weeks out, Andreas would slash slash his calorie intake down to just 2,000 a day, stripping away every ounce of fat in pursuit of that dry, shredded look that bodybuilders crave. And just before stepping on stage, he would take diuretics like Aldacton and Lasix in order to flush out every drop of water from his system to achieve that paper-thin, dehydrated skin that made his muscles pop like they were carved out of stone. And in a way, you can say it paid off. All those hours in the gym, all those tasteless meals, all that sacrifice, it paid off with 3 amateur championships and a growing reputation as one of the most shredded guys in the sport. But here is the thing, pushing your body that hard comes with a price. And Andreas was going to pay in a way no one would have predicted. You see, back in 1990, Munzer stepped onto the stage at the Arnold Classic, one of the toughest and most prestigious competitions in bodybuilding, and made his presence known. Competing for the first time, he stunned everyone by claiming an impressive 3rd place finish. It was the kind of result that turned heads, and suddenly, Andreas' name was not just circulating in Europe, it was echoing around the global bodybuilding scene. Year after year, he returned to the Arnold Classic, determined to build on that early success. But even in his wildest dreams, Andreas could not have imagined that 1996 would be his final appearance.
Andreas Munzer has been here many times to compete in this competition, and he's moving up each year. He's getting better every year. I mean, he is a perfect example of having a good balance of tremendous definition and tremendous size. Look at his thighs. His thighs have striations across. I mean, it's very rarely do you see that.
That year, something happened that Andreas had been dreaming of for most of his life. He finally got to meet his idol, Arnold Schwarzenegger, face to face. And according to those who were there, it was one of the most emotional moments of Andreas' career. Backstage, overwhelmed by the gravity of it all, Andreas broke down in tears as he stood before the man who had inspired him from the very beginning. They talked for a long time, and word has it that Arnold saw a reflection of his younger self in Andreas. A hungry, ambitious bodybuilder with sky-high dreams, relentless drive, and the kind of discipline that could leave lesser men in the dust. But while Arnold had parlayed his bodybuilding success into a long, healthy career, Andreas' path had taken a much darker turn. His obsession with chasing an impossibly shredded look had been quietly wreaking havoc on his body. At his peak, Andreas' body fat percentage reportedly dropped to just 3%. For context, that's a level so dangerously low it puts your entire system at risk of shutting down. Most bodybuilders would hesitate to dip below 6%, but Andreas wanted to be unforgettable, and in pursuit of that goal, he stripped his body of almost every ounce of fat it had. What was left was undeniably jaw-dropping, a physique that looked like it had been chiseled out of stone. But that level of extreme conditioning came with a steep price. His body, now drained and depleted, was running on fumes. Shortly after the 1996 Arnold Classic, Andreas began experiencing excruciating abdominal pain. But in true Munzer fashion, he pushed through it. Convinced that rest and recovery were for the weak, he popped painkillers, ignored the warning signs, and kept grinding just like he always had. By March 1996, however, the damage had reached a breaking point. His body, which had already been pushed far past its limits, was barely holding itself together. On March 12, 1996, Andreas was rushed to the hospital after collapsing in agony from severe abdominal pain. By then, though, it was too late. Years of extreme dieting, grueling workouts, and heavy drug use had taken their toll, and Andreas' body was on the verge of complete collapse. By 7 p.m. that same day, doctors rushed Andreas into emergency surgery, hoping to stop the bleeding in his stomach, but his body had been through the ringer for far too long, and it just could not keep up anymore. First, his liver shut down, then his kidneys followed like a domino effect. Things were spiraling fast, and by that point, even a blood transfusion was not an option. His system was way too far gone to handle it. Just 2 days later, on the morning of March 14, 1996, Andreas Munzer took his final breath at just 31 years old. After Munzer passed away, an autopsy was conducted, and what they found was as shocking as it was tragic. One of the most talked about findings was the condition of his liver. The doctors discovered that nearly 2/3 of it had deteriorated into a crumbly, useless mass, which was completely eaten away and riddled with tumors the size of ping pong balls. It wasn't a functioning organ anymore. It was essentially rotten. This level of damage left no doubt about how much stress Andreas had put his body through. The autopsy also revealed that Munzer's heart weighed a staggering 636 grams, almost double the size of a normal man's heart, which typically weighs between 300 and 350 grams. Now, I'm not about to jump into biology class, but this condition is known as cardiac hypertrophy, and it often develops after years of intense physical strain. And in Andreas' case, the endless cycle of performance-enhancing drugs likely made things worse. His heart had been pushed to the brink, just like the rest of him. As if that were not enough, Munzer's electrolytes were completely out of balance, and his potassium levels were dangerously high, which can cause serious complications like arrhythmias or heart failure. Traces of around 20 different drugs were also found in his system, along with signs of acute toxicity, possibly from a stimulant that he had taken. Ultimately though, the doctors determined that his death was most likely caused by his extreme use of diuretics. And while they are commonly used to help the body get rid of excess water and achieve that dry, ultra-shredded look, Andreas had taken things to the extreme. When he died, there was almost no water left in his system, and perhaps most disturbingly, almost no body fat either. As expected though, his death rocked the bodybuilding world, but most of all, it remains one of the sport's most tragic cautionary tales.